Let's get to the immediate project at hand. Let's talk Remnant. Where did this come from? This is with you and your partner. Again, the same partnership relationship with Chris. So, where
Yeah.
does the story come from? What inspired you to write this story and to decide that you were the one who was going to direct the story?
Coming off of the Duke of Boar, Christopher Nash, my longtime collaborator, we co-wrote the Duke of Boar, and that film was very much a very personal story. The Duke of Boar is a horror allegory about what happened to my family and my community 70 years ago when the BC government interned over 200 Freedomite Duke of Boar children in a residential school in New Denver, BC. It's a story that nobody knows about. Most people don't even know what a Duke of Boar is. And my family belonged to this religious group that was exiled from Russia. They were known as the Doukhobors, and they're pacifist, anti-materialistic. And when they came to Canada, they basically had a very tumultuous relationship with the Canadian government for decades. I'm not going to get into all of that, but basically in the 50s, my family, which were part of this like left-wing extremist sect of the Doukhobors called the Freedomites, they were deemed to be terrorists in this country. And in the eyes of the Canadian government and the Canadian public, my family was dangerous and had to be stopped. And that's where the internments led and the forced assimilation of children. And it was really bad. That's, a checkered past that I've had to learn to accept and come to terms with. That, my cousin, when he was in ninth grade, his teacher in high school came up to him and was like, "Your grandfather was a terrorist." And he came home crying, and he's like, what's the teacher talking about? And they're like, "Well, okay, we'll tell you a story of what happened." And like this is who our families were. And like they were protesting in the nude, and they would burn down their own homes. But those burnings led to the bombings and stuff like that. And then they all got arrested. All my grandparents have been arrested. So in the eyes of the public, we were terrorists. The RCMP, in fact, created a division of the police of the RCMP called D Squad, Duke of Boar Squad, just to police the Duke of Boars. And so this dark past is something that I've had to learn to accept and come to terms with. And that's really at the core of this movie called Remnant, which is a horror film that is this total thrill ride throwback to the Blumhouse movies of 15 years ago, like Insidious and The Conjuring and even Mike Flanagan's Oculus. And this is, this thematic core is exactly what our lead character, Anna, struggles with throughout the movie. And so Anna is this young woman in her early to mid 20s, and she is estranged from her mother and from her family. She's come to the city, but then she learns that her mother died and left her the family home. And she wants nothing to do with this small town that she comes from, nothing to do with this house, but she has to come back and deal with the house and sell it off. She's Gen Z. She doesn't have any money, She's struggling to make ends meet. She has a couple of jobs. What we discover when she comes back to town is that her father murdered a lot of people. He was known as a mass murderer and fled the country 10 years ago before he could get caught. And her mother stood behind her father and supported him. And basically they became pariahs in this town. And so Anna couldn't wait to leave town, but now she has to come back and the town doesn't want her there. What she discovers is that there's sort of an entity in the house that may be responsible for some of these things and may be responsible for her mother's death. And so I'll leave it there as far as like the setup for the story. But look, this is a haunted house movie. It's a possession horror film. It's an exorcism film. It's a really interesting take on an exorcism film. And at the end of the day, for me, that thematic element of being loosely inspired by my own family history is what I really love about this project. And so I'm directing it. Christopher Nash is writing it. Our producer is Cole Hewlett, who also produced The Duke of Boar for us. And so we just had such an amazing time on that film that we knew we had to keep the team going.
This is not just a pipe thing. This is actually happening.
It is going to happen. Whether it happens at a certain budget level that we would really like, around the $1 million mark, great. And if it's lower than that, that's fine too. We know how to pull this off because of our experience and the team that we have in place. You can check out remnantmovie.com to see updates on our production, the team that we currently have in place, and just more on our producers as well. This project has been kicking around for about a year and a half or so. We originally applied for the Telefilm Talent to Watch program in 2024. We didn't get it because of some stupid technicality from Telefilm. Honestly, it was like if I had graduated from film school 5 years ago, we would have been able to compete. But it was because we graduated film school 15 years ago, that was the technicality. And so to me, that's an ageist rule, and they should be condemned for it. But But anyway, I have a bone to pick with Telefilm on that one.
But this is the same story, right? Like you pitched, this was the talent to watch film was this film, Remnant.
It was roughly the same story. A lot of work has gone
Okay.
into it since then, sure. And at the time, it was called Inheritance, and then, whatever. But it's evolved since then, and for the better. It's a much, much better movie now. And frankly, I'm really proud that at the moment, we're putting this together privately. We're still open to, government grants, and we've applied for Creative BC as well. So let's see what happens there later this summer. This has been kicking around for a little while. It's a great script by Chris, and we've just been looking for private equity, and
Yeah.
we got some. And so at the moment, we have enough money now to basically say, yes, we will be shooting this movie. We're still on the hunt for private investors, like all of
Right.
us, nothing's ever in stone. So at the moment of this recording, everything I say is like, this is what it's like today.
Does
But talk to me
yeah.
in 2 months and let's see where this movie's at as far as even who's attached and where we're shooting. 2 months from now, did we stumble across an amazing tax incentive in South Africa? And are we going to send everybody there? Well, probably not.
What is the plan as it stands now? If you had to go forward today and nothing changed, what would you be doing?
Yeah. So the plan right now is to start official prep in September and then shoot for 20 days in October. Right now, the most likely scenario is to shoot 3 weeks here in Vancouver and then 1 week in Osoyoos in the Okanagan. I really want to shoot in Osoyoos. I think it's a beautiful area that hasn't really been explored too much. My parents run a motel out there, and every time I go there, I'm like, I just wish I could shoot something here. It's this beautiful desert landscape, and Kelowna has a much more thriving like Hallmark MOW industry going on, but in Oliver and Osoyoos, I just think the landscape's beautiful. The small town is just, it's one of those classic rural America type small towns, right? Just like a one street running through it, and all of a sudden you're on the highway again. And so I want to shoot the exteriors and certain scenes there. But the reason why we would do 3 weeks in Vancouver is because most of the movie takes place in this old heritage house type thing. That we feel like we can probably do easier in Vancouver, as well as have access to the crew that we really, really want to pull this movie off. It's just easier to get people to shoot here rather than asking them to go to, another town for 4 weeks.
Well, and also like you have to house them, you have to
Yeah.
figure all that stuff out for that time frame, and obviously feed people on the days they're not even working on the film, and all the stuff that goes along with that.
Yeah. And the benefit to shooting, like we have multiple budgets for this film, right? With multiple different scenarios. One scenario is that we're actually in a Soyuz for 7 weeks. So prepping this movie and shooting this film. But then the benefit to that one actually is you get the regional tax credit, which is quite a lot of money, right? So that actually does help pay for a lot more elements. But then in terms of casting, I have somebody in mind for the lead role. And generally with horror, it's widely accepted that, you don't usually have a name for your number one. They'll often become a name after, a breakout hit. But in this case, we have somebody who we've worked with before. However, for some supporting roles, I would love to be able to get, somebody a bit more famous and with just a better credits to help with marketing and distribution down the road. And so we're looking at that as well, which means also like one of the enticing factors would be, well, we're shooting in Vancouver. We're not shooting in this small town in British Columbia where, you're going to have to
Yeah.
fly in and then drive for hours. And
It's a Soyuz in October. It's not a Soyuz in the summer, right? So it's the weather is it's a little less spa worthy at that point, I
a
guess.
Soyuz in the summer is like the place to be.
Yeah,
It's amazing. But a Soyuz in October is a ghost town. Everything shuts down at like 2 p.m. and there's nothing to do. It's a good time to make
which
a
could be to
movie.
your benefit. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, yeah, I mean, and to that point, sort of coffee shops and there's a hardware store and just like certain things that we know locations that we want to shoot at, we know that we can get those locations for a much cheaper rate than if we tried to get those locations in Vancouver. The benefit of shooting in Vancouver is you have the rental houses here, you have crew here, right? But to your detriment is the fact that Netflix and Apple and Amazon and all of these studios have driven up the cost of production and the location fees at so many of these places. So many times you can be chatting with the owner of a coffee shop and they'll be like, "No, I want $20,000 a day or more." And you're like, "Yeah, but
Yeah.
we're an indie film. We can't afford that." And they go, "How do I know?" And like Apple was just here and Apple paid that. It's like, well, how do we compete with Apple? We can't. But if you go to a
Mm.
small town, your money can go so much further. People get excited about the movie making process, right? When a movie comes to a town, and if you can get a bit of a star, it's a big deal.
Like a gold rush in a way where you sort of have to find where people haven't dug yet
Yeah,
and
exactly.
stake your claim, and that way you can take advantage of, and I mean that in the best way possible, but take advantage of the of people's enthusiasm towards making films and justify that enthusiasm by being able to do things, maybe more things for that particular business or community than you could in Burnaby or in Vancouver, for example, because we are so saturated with film that it's becoming less and less of a novelty to see a film crew out in the world. Even if you are an independent film, we all think, well, our indie film is special. Everybody's going to want to see this film, but I'm sure that the five productions going down the road are the same thing. Would you say then that the fact that you have a date and a time frame set in stone, set kind of, you never want to say set in stone, but you want to say like sort of set on the calendar, and you've got the private equity that you have right now, and the plan in place to use that private equity to make this film, it sort of makes it a foregone conclusion that this is going to happen in this time frame that you're looking at, and the only thing that could change it is that you might get more money to do it a little bit differently.
The way I'm looking at this right now is I was inspired earlier this year, Anthony, when you and I met for coffee. And within less than 2 weeks, we had this podcast and we didn't think too much about it. We just went for it. And we said, this is
Right.
going to happen. Let's do it. And we'll figure it out as we go along. And I really, really like this mentality. And it's a very much an entrepreneurial mindset of like, the faster you can do something, the sooner you get results, and then you can pivot, and that feedback is what allows you to grow faster than anyone else. Some people spend years developing a movie, years developing any sort of project. It doesn't matter which industry you're in. That amount of time ruins it for them because somebody else is just going to figure it out faster and get feedback faster and grow faster. And so that's how I'm looking at this movie. Let's not overthink this. This movie's happening.
Mhm.
We have a great script, we have a great team, we're moving forward. It's going to happen. And if it doesn't, if the investors pull out, if we can't get the crew that we want, we will figure out a way to make it happen. And by talking about it, and that's also why I wanted to talk about it today, when you put it out there as if it is happening, people start to get excited. And then in some weird way, that's how it actually ends up happening, is because of the support and the people and the excitement and the enthusiasm that's out there around the project that you have self-generated. That's what we're doing.
Mhm.
And you have to just believe that I don't know exactly how to get there right now, but I know that I will get there, and it will happen, and it's going to be great.
The interesting thing, I think, from your experience and what this all sort of circles back to, the experience of you making short films in high school, is it's not that you don't know how it's going to happen. If I asked you tomorrow, what's day one, what's day two, you could probably tell me how this film is going to be done
That's
in the
true.
in like you've got the logistics figured out because of all of that and because of your producing partners and so on. Like, you're not entering into this as a naive, blindly
That's right.
ambitious
Yeah.
person. This body of work that you've put together makes it so that a film like this is incredibly achievable. And the real mystery becomes all these elements, like you're saying, the money and everything like that, of how it's all going to come together. You still don't have that part figured out, but you're not entering into it as like I'm just a dreamer with an idea. It's like you are a dreamer with a set of architectural plans.
Yeah, I can give you the plan right now as to exactly how this is going to go, and the makeup effects and the visual effects and all of these things are already figured out. The mystery is we know what all the elements are. We're just not, and this is true for any film, even a studio movie, right? Nobody knows how this movie is actually going to turn out, right? That's part
Right.
of the fun of why we do this. We are capturing magic at 24 frames a second on set, and you're just creating the perfect environment to get what you really desire this movie to be, right? But then
Mhm.
you're always going to find new ways to make that happen on set, and it's going to evolve and become something hopefully even better than what you could have possibly imagined. All of that's true, and I'm confident that all of that will happen. Part of the mystery is just, it's a bit of the Wild West out there right now as far as marketing and distribution and where the film industry is at. And I've just been so inspired over the last few months of talking to all of these amazing filmmakers and learning so much, and now applying that to my own process
Yeah.
and looking at this film like, okay, what are the interesting things that we can do as far as marketing and distribution? And so for this movie, we brought on these two sisters, Christophine and Crystal Opsitmone, who are former students of mine at VFS, but they are some of the hardest working people I've ever met. They are total A players. Cole, Chris, and I are so busy with development and meeting with investors and putting a crew together and you know shot listing and figuring out the creative. I told Crystal and Christophine, I'm like, we want you to be our producers of marketing and distribution. And so what that means is not necessarily making any sort of deals down the road, but we need you to collect as much information as possible on ways that we can market this film, strike deals with distributors. Who are the distributors? Like, what sort of deals can we put together? We are going to be so busy with development and setting this film up that we need you to think not about A, B, and C. We need you to think about D and E, so that when we get to that point, we are ready to go and we're going to be exhausted, but all of these things are already going to be in place. And does that mean we start having some of these conversations with distributors or potential streamer, other financiers right now? Or just, start to build elements and set ourselves up for success later? And so we're really taking a holistic approach to the making of this film rather than just relying on dealing with marketing and distribution at the end of the process when we probably won't feel like it because we're going to be, having just come out of the trenches of production and post production.
Yeah, one thing I think that you and I have learned in just our conversations with other filmmakers throughout the last few months is that real feeling that you're not going to compete with the next Blumhouse film or Jordan Peele film in the horror genre in their marketing engine.
Yeah.
Like that, those films are putting millions of dollars into the marketing engine. So if you can't compete at the dollar level with them, how do you compete with them? How do you put your stamp on this? Because Darren said that a few weeks ago when we had him on the podcast. He said, the distribution part's actually pretty easy. Like to get your film seen,
Yeah.
like, or on a platform, I should say, is not hard. How does it actually do something? Like, how do people find out
How
about
do you
it
get
other than
eyeballs on it? Exactly.
how do you get eyeballs on it is the problem or is the challenge.
Yeah.
And that's also ultimately what your investors and what your distributors and what your partners are looking for too is, how do we get this out of our bubble of just, friends and family going to see the film because we tell them that they should go see it? How do we break through all of that noise, knowing full well you're likely not going to have a 3 to 4 to $5 million marketing budget to
That's right.
stand above everything?
Yeah. And so the way we have approached the budget so far is even with our like high end figure of, 1 to 1.1 million, right now about $100,000 of that is just for marketing and publicity. And we're trying to preserve that. Again, this film might cost a little bit less and then we'll have to, rearrange, but right now that's the idea. And that also applies to like that's part of our festival budget, right? Sending us to Europe and wherever this movie goes to so that we can network and meet marketers. And we have to get creative. We have to start building an audience now. And so
Mm.
that's why I've set up the website, remnantmovie.com. And I urge everybody to subscribe to the weekly newsletter, and you can follow us through this entire development and pre-production, production, post-production, and distribution process. I'm going to try to keep that up to date as much as possible, the highs and the lows, so that you have a sense of like really what it takes to make a film. And Anthony, you're doing the same thing with the Quiet Canadians, and I think it's so smart just getting people in on the ground floor and excite people about this, right? And let's just let people into the creative process and
Yeah.
build this thing out together, and find out where people are from. Because maybe if all of a sudden you have a bunch of people signing up from Milwaukee, then maybe it's worth taking the movie to Milwaukee, right?
Well, and that's bring up a good point because your audience might not be sales agents and distributors. Your audience might be people who really this particular project or the subject matter or like the theme that it's based around, or even just the type of horror that you're exploring with this film, because within horror there's like different dialects of horror. What does horror mean, right? That could be your hidden audience. That audience could exist in another town in America or in Mexico or in Canada somewhere,
Yeah.
and those could be your ambassadors. Those could be the people that ultimately fight harder for your film than anybody else will, like because they go, this is the film everybody needs to see. That's a great approach, and that's a great. It's sort of opening, like you've said, is bringing people into your process is the one thing that you can do that costs you time but doesn't necessarily cost you money.